from our international business program from 2010. And he currently is a manager with AT Kearney. And he's working out of Washington, D.C. He's actually traveling today, so we definitely appreciate his time. Stephen wants to make the presentation very interactive, so if you have any questions, please put them in the chat box, and I will read them and ask Stephen to respond verbally. Or you can just unmute yourself and ask questions that way. So, okay, I think everybody.
Do you want to take attendance in the beginning or in the end?
No, I think we can just record the report. Download the report in the end. It shows what time. Yeah, go ahead.
So let's do this, guys, since you're here and you're on time. Before you have any questions, type in your name into chat so we know you're here. And we then let Stephen take off with his presentation. And when you have questions, use the chat for that.
Okay.
Let's start with your name in chat.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Sounds good. Unfortunately, Stephen's camera is not working, but we did place his picture on the website, so I hope you had a chance to see him. And with this, Stephen, you can take it away.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chokerlon, and thank you all for having me today. It wouldn't be a Zoom call without at least one technical difficulty, so I'm sorry you all can't see the great shirt I'm wearing today, but very excited to speak with you today about how to start a career in consulting. I know many of you are thinking about the next step after your studies, and consulting has been a very rewarding career path for me, and so thought I'd share a little bit about the industry, and then some tips about how you can prepare yourself to enter the industry. And so just jumping down, really wanted to accomplish three things today. One, do some introductions, talk a little bit about my firm. That's my sales pitch. And then talk about what is consulting and what are some career paths within that. And then last, spend some time talking about how can you position yourself for success to get into this career. And as Dr. Chokerlon mentioned, it's significantly better if you have questions and we can guide around that way. So please ask questions early and often. So a little bit about me here. So I am an Elizabethtown College grad from 2010. As I affectionately call it, the Harvard of Pennsylvania. I think it's a fantastic school, and I think you're all very lucky to be having an education there. After my time at Elizabethtown, I went to Dallas, Texas, started my career in the printing industry, and then eventually attended Carnegie Mellon's Tepper School of Business before transitioning to consulting. And so it's been an interesting and wild ride, particularly over the last few months. And I'm sure all of you are on that same wild ride, figuring out how do we work remotely, how do we interact with each other over Zoom. And so I thought I'd include my my work from home setup, which is innovative, I would say, working off my ironing board to be able to meet with people. And then just a little bit about me. I am from Washington, D.C., live there currently with my wife, Anna, who's pictured there. And I am a huge Cincinnati Bengals fan and also music player. So just a little bit about me before we dive in. And so the firm that I work for is a firm called Kearney, which has been recently rebranded from AT Kearney. And so we are an 80+ year management consultancy. We're with about 3,500 practitioners in 60+ offices across the world. And so we work with a variety of clients, have worked with most, if not all, of the Fortune 500, work with the US government as well as governments internationally, and have a truly international footprint. So I think if you're thinking about joining a firm, Kearney should be on your short list. Okay, sales pitch over. So what do consulting firms do? So consulting spans multiple industries and services. And so you can think about this almost like a checkerboard, where our clients exist in a variety of industries, some of which are shown here. So auto, chemicals, consumer products. You can think about the Procters and Gambles of the world, oil and gas, just to name a few. And then within each of these industries, our firm and other firms offer a variety of services. So including advanced analytics and forecasting, the ability to go through and really think about how do we transform a business from a cost perspective, the ability to go through and think about what can we do digitally and what new tools and different techniques can we use to increase the breadth and scope of our organization, as well as some of the classic strategy and top line problems. How do we go and grow a business going forward? And so within consulting, various firms will have different specialties. And so you may see some smaller firms that focus on a single industry or service, all the way up to larger generalist firms, such as Kearney, that would offer a full fleet of industries and services. And so within my career at Kearney, I have focused primarily on aerospace and defense, industrial goods, and private equity, working on a variety of operations performance improvements, as well as merger and acquisitions, due diligence, and transformations. So if any of you have questions regarding those specific areas, happy to talk about those in a little bit further depth. But as we think about this is pretty high level, the variety of industries and services. I wanted to spend some time talking about the specific projects that we would work on with our various clients. And so in the current business environment, things have changed dramatically within the past year. And so we've seen a large shift in what our clients are focused on in response to COVID. And so for the first 3 months since March, we were seeing businesses in survival mode, really thinking about, what can I do right now to make sure that I'm in business 6 months from now? And we're starting to see a transition from that survival mentality and working on those types of questions and issues to more of an operate mindset. So now that I know that I have battened the hatches and weathered some of the worst parts of the storm, what can I do going forward to adjust to this new reality, both in the short term and long term? And so these type of dynamics are coloring the types of projects that we're working on currently. And so to share a few of them, just wanted to talk through the variety of projects that you would work on if you did start a career in consulting. So you can see here, we work with clients on a variety of topics, from a short-term focus all the way to a long-term focus. And so these projects are projects that I have worked on or been involved in within the last 2 years. And so you can see on the short-term focus, really coming in and thinking about rapidly assessing the impact of COVID-19 on a business. So over a period of 3 to 4 weeks, going in and understanding for, in fact, a trucking line, what is this going to do to our shipping volumes? How many drivers will we need? What is this going to do to our costs and also our sales going forward? And how can we weather the storm? Additionally, just going down that list to point out another one, engaging in a variety of short-term topics with private equity firms. So I cited here nano diligence. So thinking about as a private equity firm is looking to acquire a company, how can we give them a very quick and also rigorous opinion within a week about whether or not it's a good idea? That usually turns into a pretty long week. But that's an example of some of the short-term focus projects. In medium term, so thinking about a time horizon of 2 to 3 years out, what can we do to really make a supply base that's increasingly robust? So with a variety of suppliers impacted under the current paradigm, what can we do to make sure that we are prepared going forward and are able to ascertain supply base risk within our organization? And then last, as we've continued to go through the past few months, we have had a shift towards longer term focus. So companies are beginning to think once again about what can we do going forward to make sure that we're as competitive as possible. And so we're seeing an increase in the amount of merger integrations that companies are considering and acquisitions which had been a pretty frozen market. And so a variety of companies are looking at M&A as a large lever to help improve their businesses, both to augment current businesses and get into new markets. We're also seeing a variety of companies think through, how can we use this as an opportunity to transform our business? So now that we have gotten through the worst of the first few months and have a plan going forward, is it time to transform our business radically to deal with this new paradigm? So what can we do from a cost and IT perspective to become significantly more efficient and leverage those efficiencies to help our customers? And so I'll pause there. So I think this part usually brings up a variety of questions regarding projects and focus areas. So wanted to ask you students, attendees, do you have any questions about the type of projects that you would focus on in management consulting?
Stephen, this is Brian Greenberg. Can you hear me?
Dr. Greenberg, good to hear you. How are you?
I am doing well, Stephen. It is wonderful to, well, not to see you, but to listen to you. I've shared with students how wonderful you are as a student and all your success. So thanks so much for joining us here. I have stories about you, but I'm not going to share those here. But I have a question for you. I guess kind of a general question for our students who don't really have a lot of information and understanding of consulting. I mean, why, and from a basic sense, why would a company spend extra money and hire another company to come in to do the work as opposed to doing it on their own? And if you had any insight into how that process works, I'd be interested in hearing about that.
Dr. Greenberg, great question, and an interesting one and core to our business. And so I think the first part of that is objectivity. So when you're operating in a corporate environment and you're thinking about going and achieving a new target, whatever that may be. So for example here, distribution footprint right sizing. So as you're thinking through something of that scale that may involve closing a warehouse and opening up a new one, the decisions get very difficult and very emotional. And so bringing in a third party can help provide objectivity. And so that's one of the primary value adds of consulting, is having a group of smart, dedicated people come in and offer an objective opinion that is devoid of passion to allow you to make a very concise decision. I think the other thing, and I'll flash back up to this page, page 5. So just looking through the industries and services, one of the advantages of bringing in outside experts is that you know your company very, very well. So you know how you operate, you understand your place within your industry. The advantage that consulting firms have is, we have likely done projects with most of your major competitors and also your upstarts. And so the ability to have an outside company who has, one, done this type of work similarly, and then also understands at a macro level the different drivers and players within each of these industries can be dramatically helpful to helping companies think about, where do we go next, and how do we zig while others are zagging.
That's great, Stephen. I was also wondering, from all the industries you listed here and you were working on, which ones were most impacted during the pandemic? Which companies did you have to help more during the pandemic?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So we are seeing, not surprisingly, pretty dramatic impacts in the hospitality and transportation and travel industries. So those are kind of the frontline industries where we're seeing dramatic impacts in terms of decline of volumes. I'd say after that kind of an initial impact from people not traveling, et cetera, distribution has been affected in very deep and pretty profound ways. So we are seeing pretty wide swings in the price of freight, whether that be trucking, ocean, or air, that was driven by a variety of shutdowns across national borders in the beginning. So you found a pretty abrupt and also meaningful impacts to those pricing and then also availability. I think at this point, some of those pressures are beginning to recede in our clients' minds. And now the focus has gone on to what's happening in the supply chains. So we're still seeing lower levels of inventory and then also productivity across industries and a variety of shortages in specific parts, particularly ones that are coming from different nations. And so there's an increasing push, I think, for all companies within these supply chains to figure out how can we increase productivity and ultimately boost inventory back up to sustainable levels.
Great, thank you.
Hi, Stephen. I have a question for you. My name is Jeremy Eberly. I'm a senior finance and econ double major. And I was just wondering, in consulting, you kind of have to be like a jack of all trades and understand how to analyze very different aspects of business, whether it's finance or marketing or technology. And I was wondering, how do you make sure that everyone in your consulting firm has like a baseline level of knowledge, or like what kind of training do you do to make sure that everyone's on the same page? And then how do you stay on top of all these different areas of business that are changing every day?
Jeremy, great question. And also thank you for being brave and being the first student to ask a question. That's impressive. So at most of the firms, you will have very highly developed training programs. So at Kearney, if you were to come in as a business analyst, which is our undergrad level, when you come to the firm, you go through a 2-week-long training program to build up your skills. So first week is self-directed with a variety of online tools to get you familiar with some of the techniques that we use, whether that be building slides, which is an important part of the job, so communicating visually, building advanced models, whether that be through Excel, which is still probably our most common analytical tool, or more advanced tools such as R, Python, SQL, etc., variety of languages. And so that first week is really you diving in and figuring out, based on my college education and where I came from, what do I think I need to get better at quickly? Then after that, you come into a 1-week-long training program where you are with your peers and essentially go through a variety of mock projects under the leadership of various managers, principals, and partners. And so really hands-on tutelage. From there, one of the best ways to learn this industry is by doing it. So it is an apprentice model. And so after those 2 weeks and that baseline of skills, you'll be put onto your first project. And I think the biggest thing is your manager will know that you're new, right? And will help show you the ropes and guide you and help develop you and put you into situations where you can succeed, but also feel a little bit uncomfortable as well. So that way you can grow. And so that's on the informal side. On the formal side, on a continuing basis, we host a variety of trainings each Friday. So usually you have 4 to 5 trainings that you can participate in on an ad hoc basis to build your skills. We also have formal training programs for each level that occur every quarter, usually between 3 and 4 day sessions to help grow you as you grow through your career. And then last, each individual is assigned a mentor. And this is pretty common across firms that will work with you to develop a skill building plan. So thinking about what type of projects and trainings do I need to help round myself out. So as you said, that I have a baseline knowledge of marketing, analytics, IT, etc. And then how do I work at creating a deep expertise in a certain area? So ultimately you can, as you become a partner, be known for something and be known for an expertise that is needed by clients and then also monetizable for the firm.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, good questions. So I'll keep going through. If there are other questions that come up, please stop me. Feel free to interrupt. I will not be offended. So this is a good segue from Jeremy's question into the typical career path in consulting. And so I've highlighted here just a few different ways where individuals would come into different firms. And so the baseline is the business analyst. And so this is typically the position you would come into after undergrad. For the record, all of these may be named something slightly different across firms. So you may also see analyst, consultant, etc. But essentially, this job is one where you would come in out of undergrad, receive those training programs that I had mentioned, and then be staffed onto a project where you would be tasked with any different sort of various analytical tasks. So typically, the expectation for a business analyst would be you were in charge of one specific aspect of a project, whether that be the cost model for a cost reduction project. You could be in charge of running the growth model, supply and demand model for a strategy project, but usually a very analytical task. And so in your base, you're building a variety of analytical skills, also learning how to present the analysis in a way that's client ready. And then last, being put into some targeted areas for client interaction. And what I mean by that is you'll typically be interacting with managers and directors at the client on a one-on-one basis, beginning to learn how to lead those interviews. And then we'll look for targeted speaking roles to get you in front of some more senior leadership. So vice presidents, COOs, et cetera. As you go through your career and eventually go through becoming a senior business analyst and then associate, which is our post-MBA role, typically, your focus will shift from doing and owning the analysis to more project and people management. So really learning how to develop team members, passing on those skills that you have gained and learned through the apprenticeship model, understanding what good looks like in terms of analysis. Your focus will turn more towards how do I develop the entire thought process for an analysis and guide someone to complete it, while focusing on that project management aspect. So how do we deliver a project under tight timelines? And then as you continue growing more senior, you'll begin to transition your responsibilities to business development and client relationships and also thought leadership. So what are we bringing to clients and what value can we add to their businesses to address their problems that they're currently facing, whether it be a large macro impact such as COVID or a micro impact such as a lagging productivity at a variety of plants. And I think one of the things that I wanted to stress is in terms of comparison to other industries, consulting has a very formalized and clear path of growth for you. So the expectation at a variety of firms is for you to go through these levels according to a given cadence. So you can see here, I put up a few year timelines, but the expectation would be that when you come in as a business analyst, within 6 months to 1.5 years, you've built the skills to be able to be promoted and act as a senior business analyst. And so the pathway for you in this career is really determined by your skills and your ambition. So if you are very ambitious and delivering very high quality work, there is a potential path to partner for you, within 7 to 8 years. So I think that's one of the areas compared to other industries where consulting stands out as an opportunity for you to grow very, very quickly. I'll pause there. Any questions on the roles in consulting or the entry points or any of the roles that I've listed here on this slide?
Can I ask a quick question, Steven? So how important, what important skills are you looking for people coming in with bachelor's degrees? So are you looking for things like certificates, I don't know, or exposure to SQL, R, and Python, or is it a technical thing, or are you just looking for more business background, general business background?
Dr. Krzyzewski, that's a great question. So I think depending on the type of firm that you're applying to, they're going to look for different things. So within consulting, there are firms that are generalist firms, such as Kearney, McKinsey, BCG, LEK, where you will be brought in essentially for being a good athlete. And what I mean by that is it's not as dependent on the skills that you have currently. It's more of a hire based on potential. So things that we would look for are demonstrated success academically. So getting very good grades in very hard courses at a very good school like Elizabethtown College. We would look for involvement in the community and really passion, as I term it. So folks who are engaged and interested in something, whether that be community service, whether that be music, writing, art, something where you have a demonstrated spike that you've been working on for multiple years. And then last, I think there's also the interest within business. So has the individual sought out opportunities throughout internships, et cetera, to gain skills and really been intellectually curious and trying to improve themselves through work experience. And so the generalist firms will look less for particular skills and more for, let's say, attitude and aptitude to be able to succeed. There are also firms that have a different approach that are more technically focused and are specialist firms. And so for those firms, they would look for specific skill sets. So for example, there are some firms that focus on tech implementation. And so those firms would focus on, has this person worked in tech before? Have they sought out internships within that? And then do they have a relevant degree? So within that, those individuals would go through and think about, does this person have a computer science or IT background, et cetera? For Kearney and the generalist firms, we have hired people who are English majors. We have hired folks who are business majors, computer scientists, et cetera. And so we're more open to diverse backgrounds, diverse types of thought to help solve problems. Okay, any questions from students?
I actually have one question, sir. My name is William Patterson. I'm a senior dual major marketing and public relations major.
Hi,
and
William.
my question involves public relations. So I've had multiple courses throughout the years that are centralized around crisis communications and how to deal with in a PR campaign, how to combat against a crisis. And I was curious, do you notice any similarities? Consulting, there are multiple different roles, and Jeremy pointed that out, that you do have to be a jack of all trades. But do you notice a lot of public relations aspects whenever you're dealing with a crisis in a consulting project?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, William. So start from the internal perspective and then go external. So internally, public relations, a lot of the skills that you acquired working with that, how do we craft a compelling and consistent message? That is extremely important within an organization during a crisis. So you have a variety of people when a crisis hits who are concerned for their jobs, and they're unsure, and that lack of clarity can create fear and reticence. And so as you come into a company as a consultant and you're working through that, a lot of our job is to essentially act as I like to call it, management therapists. So how do we work through with the executives and then also folks who are closer to the working level, directors, managers, et cetera? How do we work with them to, one, calm them down and manage their expectations, but also get them ready for the next steps? And so we spend a significant amount of time as we're preparing written materials, thinking about who is the audience, what are they feeling, how are we really addressing their concerns as we're preparing written documents. And so that's the internal aspect. I think the external aspect, we do get involved significantly with senior leadership, talking about how they message change. So whether that be to their board of directors, how do you go through and talk to these essentially arm's length representatives who have fiduciary responsibility to the business about your plan. We'll help them manage communications with those individuals. And we'll also help them manage communications with their supply base, thinking about if they're putting in a new set of standards, how do you best communicate that? And their customers as well. So if you're launching a new product or initiative, what are the types of things and types of aspects that you really need to convey to those individuals? I'll pause there. Does that answer your question, William?
It absolutely does. And thank you so much for answering it.
Absolutely. These are good questions today. I like it. Okay. We'll keep going forward from here. So I think one of the things that I was always a bit confused about when I was younger, thinking through what does a day in the life looking like in consulting, was what do you typically do? And so I put up a typical day that I went through as a young associate. So I think within this career, it is a pretty demanding career that does take up a lot of your time, especially Monday through Thursday when you're traveling. And so a typical day may start off with, hitting the gym. So making sure to take care of yourself, which I think is important, especially when you're traveling. And then going into client meetings, at 8 in the morning. And typically in those meetings, we are asking clients for a variety of data, talking about work products that we put together and analyses, and reviewing those together to think about how can we make these better? Because I think with Kearney, one of the key parts of our model is how do we co-create the solution with a client? So that way, when we leave and the project ends, the change is lasting. So we spend a lot of time working with our clients to come through and think through our analyses. As you continue going through your day, typically you'll catch up with your partners, talk about what you've learned. They'll be interested in your analysis, and so you'll share that with them. After that, grab a quick lunch, sync up with your team to talk about what are the activities we need to do to move our analysis along, and think through how are we solving the problem. You'll spend a significant amount of time building models and reviewing them with your team before eventually going into a series of calls later in the evening to review those either with your sponsor for the project, which is usually VP level or above, and then also your manager to debrief and talk about what's next. Later into the evening, when things get back to normal post-COVID, a lot of times we will go out and do a team dinner. So get together and talk about our days over a meal, potentially an activity. And then after that, you have time to yourself where you can engage in firm building activities, which we call them, which can involve preparing presentations for recruiting. They can involve developing an intellectual capital document, or a variety of tasks such as that. And then after that, I put in call Anna, because that's what I usually do. That's my wife. Talk to her, see how her day's going, before checking a few emails and going to bed. So that would be a typical day in the life as a consultant. And so I imagine some of you are looking at this and thinking this is a pretty long day in consulting. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the structures that we have in place to help support you. And we talked about this a little bit earlier with Jeremy's question. Each of the firms is going to provide a variety of mechanisms and also structures to make sure that you're successful. And so the first of that is that personalized onboarding and learning that we talked about earlier. So variety of trainings, 2 of them are listed here, which is some of the individual learnings and trainings that we provide to new hires. But then also going forward, offering a variety of support networks, so that way you can be successful. So we talked about the mentors, which really serves as your Sherpa through the firm. So thinking through how you're going to develop your career to make sure that you're successful. We also have a variety of diversity networks. So finding folks who have a similar shared experience to you can be very important. So variety of mechanisms in place for affinity groups based on ethnicity, orientation, country of origin, etc., that you can seek out and talk with and act as support and really celebrate those communities and their heritage. We also have staffing and HR. And so these individuals will help you get staffed on projects, help you make introductions with various leaders at the firm. So that way you can continue to meet folks and get staffed on projects. And then we also have a variety of service and industry teams. So if you're interested in marketing for consumer packaged goods, we have teams that you can go and participate in, learn about those, and then offer you support as you continue to grow your career. I'll pause there. Any questions on the structures of support within consulting to make sure that you're successful?
Stephen, Laura Cardona has a question. She's an international business major and she's actually traveling. She's on Amtrak train and her connection is not going very well, so she's traveling to E-Town. Her question is, how often do you get feedback on your work, feedback from your manager on projects? And also, what was the impact of COVID on the frequency of feedback, on the rate at which feedback is given, basically? Do you get more feedback now, less feedback? How did the pandemic impact the feedback on projects?
Yeah, that is an excellent question. And so first and foremost, Laura, safe travels home. But thinking about feedback, so in consulting, feedback is a constant, both formally and informally. And so I'll talk a little bit about the formal mechanisms. So formally, you will get what we call an EPE, or engagement performance evaluation, at the end of each project that you do. And usually this is a pretty rigorous written form that will be filled out by your project manager. And you two will go through it together, talking about what you did well, and what we call even better ifs. So what could we do better next time? These EPEs will culminate in a performance review, which occurs every 6 months, talking about where you're going at the firm, where we view your performance, and then also giving you guidance on what you need to do to ultimately be promoted. As in our firm, we want folks to grow and continue to develop. Informally, feedback happens all the time. So after speaking with you all, I will be hopping on a call with some consultants on my team to review their work product. That typically happens once to twice a day, and offering them feedback on is the information that you've put together clear and impactful? Is the information conveyed in a way that's important to clients? And then last, I think, is the analysis sound? And so you'll get feedback on your work product consistently. And then after meetings, get some instant feedback on how you presented and how you came across to various clients. For the second part of the question, in terms of COVID, I would say those formal structures remain the same. The informal structures have definitely been affected by COVID, as each team figures out exactly how to work together to achieve what they want to achieve. So there's been a greater focus on touching base over video calls. There's been a greater focus on understanding, I think, when really understanding folks' life cadence. So we have been trying to figure out how do you make working at home manageable, because you can never step away from work. So figuring out when does it make sense to have feedback conversations, and how do we make those more formalized? So putting time on our calendars, et cetera, to make sure that we have that cadence, in addition to the informal cadence, which was a little bit easier when we were sitting side to side next to each other at the client site.
Thank you very much, Stephen.
Stephen, I have another question for you.
Yes, please.
So a lot of our students probably don't think about this right now, but once they get out in the world and things start to change, I believe this is something that often comes up, and it's about lifestyle. It's about the decisions when it comes to things like family, and so consulting, at least traditionally, was known for just working people hard and requiring them to make some very tough decisions when it comes to family. That world has changed, but I'm not sure how much it's changed, and I'm wondering if you could give some insight into questions like that. If someone wants to have a family, they want to have kids, maybe they want to cut down on traveling at a certain kind of path might there be for them in this world?
Yeah, no, that's a very important and prescient question, Dr. Greenberg. So to your point, consulting is typically a very high octane career that can be challenging in a work-life balance. So I think our firm and other firms that I have friends at have been evaluating this pretty deeply and thinking about how can we make this more sustainable, particularly when there's an increasing battle for talent. I think in the past, consulting, investment banking were two of the most, let's just say, lucrative and professionally rewarding career paths. And now there's increased competition, particularly from the tech sector. And so it's forced the conversation a little bit further. So to manage it, the firm has put into place a variety of structures. So at our firm, we have something called a leave of absence, which essentially lets you step away and take a breather for up to a year. And so I actually just took one about 6 months ago, took 6 months off to explore some passions, and then came back to the firm after that. So there is this off ramp. I think additionally, the firm has put into place a variety of structures, particularly around family. So having flexible paternity and maternity leave that you are able to take if you're trying to start a family and be able to break up over time. And so those are some of the big ticket items to address work-life balance and make things a little bit easier. I think on the day-to-day, we are still trying to figure out the right mix, particularly in a post-COVID distributed environment, about working hours and how do we set boundaries. So we have, on each of our projects, we have something called a Work Smart Charter, which basically lays out how we're going to team and put out what's important to everyone. So if it's important for someone to be able to go running or spend time with their family, how do we craft the project and the timelines around those needs to make sure that people are successful long-term? And so those are some of the formal structures we put into place. I would say I don't think that we're there yet, to be quite honest. As ultimately, it's a client services business, and our clients are very demanding with what they expect from us. And so meeting that is always a challenge. But those are some of the strides that the industry is trying to take to address those. But I think just students, as you're thinking about starting a career in consulting or otherwise, do have a hard internal conversation with yourself about what your priorities are in terms of work-life balance. Because I think consulting will be, compared to other industries, a little bit worse of work-life balance. Just to flash back up this page, this was an actual day that I lived. So, there's a lot of time there invested in work that is very engaging and very stimulating, but it is a lot of time to put into an industry. Okay. So I think the last thing, wanted to give you a flavor of the types of industries that consulting addresses, what type of projects you'd work on, what a day in the life looks like, and then also some of the support networks that you had. I think the last thing about how to start a career in consulting is what can you do to position yourself to get the job if you're interested in this type of work. So just wanted to talk about just 4 key areas. I think first and foremost, academics. This is probably the easiest and best lever that you have. Get the best grades in the hardest courses available. And then secondly, you have tremendous professors at this school. Dr. Chocolon, Dr. Greenberg, Dr. Veramini, Dr. Emma Newhauser, just variety of professors who have some of the best knowledge in the world to prepare you to be competitive in a competitive job market. Really take their advice, listen to your professors. Dr. Greenberg can probably tell you I didn't always, but that would be a piece of advice that I learned the hard way. I think second, just going around the horn, community and passions, get engaged in whatever it may be. So whether it's building something in your community, Habitat for Humanity, Into the Streets, a group at Elizabethtown, or if it's making art or writing, whatever it may be engaged and demonstrate your passion. I think the industry is constantly looking for folks who are engaged and curious about life in general. And so those type of aspects can be as meaningful as getting a 3.7 versus a 3.6. Third thing I'd mention is connections. So I think, today was meant to be an introduction to get you thinking about the industry. Next step is to go out and have conversations with additional individuals, right? So reach out to alumni who are working in the industry and try and set up just informal conversations with them to understand what's the type of work that they do, what are the differences between their firms. Because in consulting, one of our favorite phrases is, it depends. So I've shown you an introduction from Kearney's perspective. Different firms have different perspectives. So go out and learn, get engaged. One of the best ways to do that is by applying for a variety of internships to test and refine your skills. So take it out of the classroom and into the world. And then last, decide if you're interested in this, right? So I think it's been very rewarding as a post-MBA career. Frankly, if I had had the grades out of undergrad, probably would have gotten into it sooner because I think it's very engaging and very fun. But think about the profession and think about, is this right for me? Am I eager to learn more? Do I want to engage in this? Because I think it is a very exciting career path, one where you can grow incredibly quickly and is very rewarding long term. And so with that, that kind of brings us to the end of what I had for regularly scheduled programming. Happy to take any additional questions you may have at this point on consulting, life, etc.
Yeah, I have a question. My name is Jared Beachy. I'm a junior international business student. And my question is related to my major in international business. So I did a quick search and saw that Kearney is associated in more than 40 countries worldwide. So I just was wondering if you could touch on the difference between working with a domestic company compared to an international one.
Yeah, Jared, great question. So I'll answer that in a few ways. I think most of the companies that we are dealing with currently tend to be international businesses. And so the concept of a single nation country feels more and more foreign as globalization continues to move forward. So I think some of the things that we've noticed, particularly, and I've noticed having worked internationally with Kearney, just different approaches and different norms in different countries, how they conduct business and their approach are always very interesting. In the industries that I work at, industrials, they're typically highly regulated industries. And so oftentimes we'll spend a significant amount of time understanding the different legal ramifications of potential improvements that we put in and recommend. And so that ends up being pretty interesting, reading a variety of legal regulations to make sure that your operational plan is going to be compliant with workforce labor practices. But I think what's really exciting is that different regions of the world are focused on different problems. So in the US, the market for consulting is highly mature, very developed. And so the types of questions that you're answering these days are less and less pure strategy, kind of green field questions, and more operationally focused and operation improvement focused, and also mergers and acquisition focused, versus a geography like the Middle East where the questions can be broader. How do we enter different markets? How are we going to stand up a new organization, et cetera? And so as you're thinking about firms, Jared, international business guy, you're thinking about, how can I work in an international business? Plug for Kearney and a few other firms. We have programs where you can go and work a project internationally or transfer offices. So I have a friend, Richard Cornelius, who just transferred to Australia and is working on a variety of projects down there. We have a lot of telecommunications and mining work versus what he was doing in the US, which is mostly aerospace focused. And so if you're interested in different industries, some firms such as Kearney, McKinsey, et cetera, offer programs where you can go and transfer to offices. And so you can craft your career going to different countries and developing a specialty that way, which I think is pretty cool and pretty engaging and something that I've enjoyed doing as well.
Stephen, if you don't mind, can I run a quick speaker survey while you're answering student questions and they're still here and they have you?
Absolutely, Doctor.
So we evaluate speakers. Those of you who are new to this, for every speaker we bring on campus, we would like to know what students think. So if you can give us this feedback and just help us evaluate what we want to do going forward, we'd appreciate it. Thanks.
Yeah, so
Stephen? Oh, sorry. You go.
I had a question. I'm Theron. I'm a first year international business student. And I was just wondering, you talked about your, your work-life balance, and I just wanted to ask how often you are actually traveling and visiting clients and working with your team versus, you're at home.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. Slightly dependent on project. So currently I am actually in Norfolk, Virginia, traveling for a project. And typically my projects have been approximately 80% travel, so Monday to Thursday on the road. But there are certain projects, for example, if you were in Chicago working on industrials, there's a chance you may not travel too much, as there's significant portion of that work located near that locality. Or if you were doing financial services in New York, you are probably not going too far away from home. And so some of that is, if you don't want as rigorous of a travel schedule, there are some location choices that you can make to help ease that burden on yourself.
Stephen, this is Jeremy again. My question is, how did you go about determining what practice area you wanted to specialize in? I know that we don't really have like a formal operations major. So how did you end up going into that, and also using your knowledge of finance in mergers and acquisitions?
Yeah, that's a great question, Jeremy. I think some of it was the first job I got out of college was at an industrial manufacturing company, Koenig and Bauer, printing press manufacturer. So learned a lot about operations and industrials there, and liked it. So when I came to the firm Kearney, I decided I wanted to focus on those type of projects. And so started making connections and relationships there, and eventually had one project that was an industrials project where they said, we're going to be in Hawaii for a month. Are you interested? And I said yes to that. And since then, I have not looked back. It was a great project. Nothing like getting paid to snorkel. So that was really fun. And since then, I've just been working with that practice and that group, and I've enjoyed it. And then lately, at a personal interest, I wanted to do more and more private equity work. I've always been interested in how companies acquire businesses and divest businesses. And so I reached out to a few partners there, asked to work on their projects and work with them. They said yes, and then have been doing quite a few diligences since then.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions from the group? If not, that's okay. I know it's Friday.
All right, but in closing, I do want to thank you for coming on. I know you have a super busy schedule. In fact, everyone knows that already. So we really appreciate you doing this, and I really hope everyone who has attended will soak up some of your wisdom, and we're hoping to have you back. So thank you, students, for coming. Thank you, Stephen, for doing this in spite of technical difficulties. This was a good lecture, and this is the kind of stuff we're looking from our invitees. So you students should think about attending all of these lectures, because you'll have people with different backgrounds and very different life stories, but they are all showing up to produce these talks that can be as helpful as possible to you. So thanks again, Steve.
Thank you, Stephen. Bye.
Thank you all very much. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you,
Have a nice
Stephen. Great
weekend.
to see you.
Great to see you too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your time today. It was a pleasure to hear from you.
Thanks all.
I was wondering if, I don't know if you are willing to do this or not, but I was wondering if I could have some contact information from you.
Jared, absolutely. I'll go ahead and just post my email in the chat.
All right, thank you.
Happy to chat further.
Appreciate it.
Awesome. There you go. You have a nice Friday.
You too.